Got it. Wow, awesome.
I'll be over here if you need anything.
I want to be really... If everybody could find their seats, please. We'll get started here in about 20 seconds. Yeah, that's close enough. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. My name is Nath Lawver, and I'm the principal officer. My card says Secretary Treasurer of the Pierce County Central Labor Council, AFL-CIO. We're Pierce County's largest labor federation. We have 112 affiliates who represent 45,000 workers who live and work here in Pierce County. One of the traditions that we have in our meetings is that we do a land acknowledgement, and I would like to share that with you at this time, and then we'll get going. The Pierce County Central Labor Council acknowledges that we're on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe. Though the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854 removed the native peoples to clear the way for colonial settlement, the Puyallup people have lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so to this day. The Pierce County Central Labor Council sends gratitude to the Puyallup tribe and all Coast Salish people upon whose ancestral lands we reside and work. We commit to uplifting the voices, experiences, and histories of the Indigenous people of this land and beyond. Thank you. And it is now my pleasure to introduce the president of the Washington State Labor Council and a dear good friend of mine, April Sims.
Thank you, Nate. Nate forgot to mention lifelong resident of the gritty city of Tacoma, so let's just give it up for the 253 real quick. All right. Good evening, everyone. As Nate mentioned, my name is April Sims. My pronouns are she and her. I have the privilege of serving as president of the Washington State Labor Council, AFL-CIO, which is the umbrella labor organization in Washington State, representing more than 600 locals and over 600,000 unionized workers in every industry, sector, and corner of this beautiful state. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. Thank you, Nate, for grounding us with that land acknowledgement. And I want to start first by acknowledging that we're here because this moment demands both action and unity. Working people in Washington are facing unprecedented challenges. Wages that don't keep up with the rising cost of living, threats to worker protections, and rollbacks at the federal level that weaken our trusted institutions and threaten our health. The urgency of this moment could not be more clear. And we know that what we do here in Washington matters, not just for our families and our communities, but as an example and a source of hope for the rest of the country. So I especially want to thank our Attorney General, Nick Brown, for prioritizing protecting workers in our state and for his tireless work defending all Washingtonians. Y'all can give it up for A.G. Brown. From fighting federal overreach to standing up from corporate abuse, from protecting women and children from the threat of deepfake AI to guarding our healthcare data from ICE, A.G. Brown's leadership is helping to keep Washington a place where fairness and opportunity and safety and justice are more than just words. So tonight, we'll hear from A.G. Brown and leaders and advocates who are fighting every day to make sure that Washington is a place where every worker can thrive and every family can be safe. After some brief remarks, we'll move into some prearranged questions, and then we'll open the floor to some Q&A, and we'll wrap up promptly by 8:30. So I want to thank the Pierce County Central Labor Council for co-hosting this event, and I want to welcome all of you, our partners, our elected officials, and union leaders and workers who have joined us tonight. And speaking of partners and elected officials, it is now my honor to introduce someone who has spent his career making Pierce County a place where everyone feels safe, welcome, and connected. Ryan Mello, you can give him a round of applause while he works his way to the front of the room. Ryan Mello is not only our county executive, he's a longtime friend of labor, an environmental champion, and a leader who knows we only move forward together. Ryan has a well-earned reputation for listening to working people and rolling up his sleeves to make sure our county is a place where families can succeed. And if you've ever been in a meeting with him, then you know he somehow manages to balance policy details with a sharp sense of humor. And we are so lucky to have his leadership in our county and at tonight's town hall. Please join me in welcoming Pierce County Executive Ryan Mello.
Well, thank you so very much, April. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. It is so great to welcome you to Pierce County. Many of you live here. Attorney General Brown, I didn't realize TVW was going to be here, so I had to get back on script. Got to mind my P's and Q's here this evening. But it is so great to welcome all of you to this Workers' Town Hall. We're all here to make Washington and Pierce County a more affordable place with good paying jobs, safe jobs that folks go home at night, and secure jobs and retirements that we can live long into the future here in the South Sound. Look, elections have consequences, right? And we are living through those consequences. Good consequences, like the fruits of the labor of this amazing Attorney General that we get to hear from tonight and be in partnership with tonight, and really, really serious, dire consequences at the federal level. Elections have consequences. They have consequences at the local level. You know, for the first time in Pierce County, as your county executive, our 23 different bargaining units are, with our active support and encouragement in the county executive, are bargaining in coalition. They're doing coalition bargaining with our strong enthusiasm and our strong coordination. We're really proud of that. For the first time in at least 8 years, our 23 different bargaining units at Pierce County are actually bargaining at the bargaining table. They're not just doing fake bargaining and told what to take. They're actually bargaining at the bargaining table, sitting across the table and bargaining. And look, at just 3:30 today, I hosted many of my good friends in the room today, actually, the Pierce County Central Labor Council, the carpenters, the Pierce County Building Trades, to begin negotiating Pierce County's very first community workforce agreement. So it's really great to be here with Pierce County Central Labor Council, the Washington State Labor Council. April, thank you so very much for your amazing, amazing leadership. And our great Attorney General, Nick Brown. Thank you to all the union leaders who are here and all you do to fight for working people and all working people, whether they have the great benefit of being a part of a union or not. Organized labor is at the tip of the spear to lift up all workers and all working families in the great state of Washington. It's really great to have you, Attorney General Brown, here back in your home county, in Pierce County. My team has the great privilege of working very closely in these really trying times, working really closely with Attorney General Brown's very capable staff. They not only pick up the phone every time we call, but they actually host every other week coalition meetings with counties like Pierce County, because they know that when we organize, we win, right? And he is proving that when we organize, we win against the Trump administration. Nick Brown and the Attorney General's office, his very, very, very capable staff and this huge, effective public law firm that he leads, are working to defend Washingtonians in every way. From the first moment, the first week he entered office, when he helped to protect birthright citizenship in this country and led the fight to protect birthright citizenship, to helping to protect funding that fuels the funding for thousands of public sector jobs in this state and across the country. Attorney General Brown is leading in 30 plus, I've lost count. We have a website just to manage this, to keep it straight in Pierce County, 30 plus lawsuits against the Trump administration. They're working very, very hard on our behalf. Nick has always been an advocate for working people and for his home community here in Pierce County. As Attorney General Brown, he's working hard to stand up for Washington values and make our state the very best place to live and work. So friends, please help me welcome to the stage our good friend who always has our back, has the back of working people, and will never stop fighting for us. Help welcome Attorney General Nick Brown.
Thank you. You know, I always want to start by saying I get nervous when people give me a standing ovation at the beginning of any public remarks that I would make, but there are lots of thanks to begin with. But I want to acknowledge that we're here the day after Labor Day, but I hope that after tonight we can call this Labor Night, because I think we have lots of labor in the building, lots of really important issues that's going to lift up and talk about the issues that are facing working people and union members and non-union members across this state. I want to thank Nath and April for your leadership in helping us come together today, and the leadership that you are doing on behalf of all of the coalition partners that you have. It has been great to get to work with all of you. I also just want to give a quick moment to thank my mom, who is here. I will note that, you know, as April said and as Ryan referenced, this is my home community, my hometown, and both of my parents actually used to work at Clover Park Technical College. So it is great to be back in my home community. As you guys know, I grew up just down the road. My very first professional experience was just down the road at the Lakewood Taco Bell on Steilacoom Boulevard. And I told that story a lot when I was running for office, but I always want to highlight that it was, in fact, my first professional experience, because it was my first experience as a teenager learning what it meant to make minimum wage, working with people who are struggling to get by, often working multiple jobs, learning about the dignity of all work and seeing how that was sometimes regarded and oftentimes disregarded. And that was a formative experience in my life. I also just want to thank TVW for carrying this on their channels. I really appreciate the opportunity to spread some of the conversation that we're having this evening with as many people as possible, for I appreciate them for joining us. And we are here today, as Ryan and April have both highlighted, because of the crisis and urgency of this moment. Because working people and working families across this state and across this country are living in an intense time where their safety, when their health, affordability issues are at a crisis point. And we are dealing at a moment in this country where workers are fighting for basic dignities. And this has been a struggle that has been going on for generations, but I see the impact of so many things happening in our country acutely in my position. Wealth is far too concentrated at the top, and people living at the margins, people working hard for a living, are struggling to get by. We have a federal administration that is actively working to undermine so many of the protections that people in this room and the unions that you represent have fought, not only for yourselves, but for the entire country, have fought for. And we are seeing a rollback from those things, stripping 500,000 of federal workers of their union rights. And affordability, you can boo, you boo, I sue. Affordability is at a crisis point for all of us. And too many people's wages are stagnant, and too many people's are just struggling to get by. And we certainly feel those problems here in Washington. We are not immune to these struggles and the interest that would try to squeeze every penny out of the working class, just to concentrate that wealth at the top. So tonight we're here to hear your questions, have a conversation. I will not pretend to have all the answers. I will tell you about the immensely important work that is happening in our agency and the work that we can do in partnership with you all. But it is an opportunity for me and my staff, and I want to thank all of our staff who helped put together this event this evening. It is an opportunity for us to hear from you and to provide some feedback and figure out how we can try to solve these problems together moving forward. I'm also here today because addressing the issues facing working people in Washington is one of the most important priorities of my administration as the Attorney General of this state. And just in the past week, we have joined together with other states, filing a brief on behalf of AFSCME and protecting union rights for federal workers. We fought back. We have fought back against the terrible actions from the federal administration to take away the rights of farm workers and domestic workers in this country. And we also won a federal case to release of over $184 million for the AmeriCorps program that provides money for everyone in this state and everyone in this country, including so many new workers who are entering the workforce. And moving forward, there is an increased focus in my administration to do more to stop the plague of wage theft. Recent estimates show that American workers now lose over $18 billion per year, $18 billion per year to wage theft. From the sounded like my chief of staff. From the underpayment of earned wages by employers, and this is more money than Americans lose to all other forms of property theft, including robberies, burglaries, larceny, and motor vehicle theft combined. Wage theft is an immense problem in this state and in this country. And so I want to highlight those issues and priorities for our agency moving forward. And I want to thank so much of the advocacy work that has led to moments like these from the people in this room and your brothers and sisters across this state who've been advocating to make Washington State one of the best possible states for workers despite our challenges across the country. Washington has some of the strongest labor protections in the country, including the nation's second highest minimum wage, requirements for paid overtime for all workers, including agricultural workers, protections for pregnancy-related discrimination, and protections against retaliation. But laws are only as effective as our ability to enforce them and stand behind them. And it is one thing to pass a law at a city or county or state level, but we have to make sure that we have the tools necessary to enforce those laws robustly to protect people. And that is my commitment as Attorney General. And last week, we released our annual Labor Day report, which included 4 recommendations that our office will be pursuing in the near future. One is to launch a new dedicated strategic labor enforcement unit within the Attorney General's office. Number 2 is to partner with the State Department of Labor and Industries to improve existing enforcement processes. Number 3 is to pass the Immigrant Worker Protection Act. And number 4 is to do everything that we can to protect Washington workers from the attacks of this federal administration. So we have a lot to discuss, and this is obviously only one part of the conversation that I hope we continue to have as a coalition of partners moving forward. But I do just want to acknowledge all the people that are here today and those who couldn't come today helping put this together. We have many important partners, including many of our partners from the Department of Labor and Industries. I know Director Sachs is around here somewhere. I want to thank you for your partnership. He's waving in the very back. Along with Elizabeth Smith, Brian Templeton, and Carl Backen from the L&I as well. I know we have some state and elected local leaders. I see Steve Conway, my friend. I think Mari Levitt is here or was here. I also want to thank some of your representatives in Pierce County, including Senator Yasmin Trudeau. I know we have members from the American Federation of Teachers who are here, who work at Clover Park Technical College. Thank you for your partnership. And we have representatives from some of our congressional colleagues as well, including representatives from Congressperson Emily Randall, Kim Schreier, and Marilyn Strickland's offices. And we have many other elected representatives from your unions. I appreciate your leadership and partnership today. And I especially want to acknowledge my union partners in the Washington State Attorney General's offices. I know we have representatives from both our professional staff union and our Attorney General union. I appreciate the collaboration that we've been able to build over the last 8 months. Now I want to turn it back over to April. We'll start these questions, and just want to thank you all again for attending today. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah, you can, yeah. so weird to sit here with my own face looming over me. I just want to acknowledge that.
But it's such a good picture, and it's flanked by two amazing logos, right? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for those remarks. Thank you for reminding us of all the power and the potential that we have here in Washington State. I think, can you all hear me okay? Now, can you all hear me okay? All right. It takes a village, it really does. Okay, I think I get the first question tonight. Moderator privilege, I think they call it. So my question for you, A.G. Brown, we all know that working people are experiencing the consequences of federal rollbacks in real ways, right? We've seen attacks on overtime pay that strip away promised wage protections for millions of workers. We've watched as safety standards for industries like construction and agriculture have been weakened, leaving workers more vulnerable on the job. And we've seen enforcement of the U.S. Department of Labor scaled back, whether it's wage theft, misclassification of workers as independent contractors, poor protections for immigrant and farm workers who are at the most risk of exploitation. And so with these kinds of changes at the federal level, and with the Department of Labor no longer playing its historic role of defending workers, how can you and how can we collectively at the state level work together to make workers' lives better and ensure that their rights are fully protected?
Yeah, I very much appreciate it. There are so many things happening at the federal level that the team in the AG's office is reviewing on a day-to-day basis. It seems almost on a weekly basis we're seeing executive actions from the administration, rulemaking from some of the federal agencies, statements simply made by cabinet leaders or the president that are having, from my perspective, truly devastating impacts on a number of different sectors. And some of the things that you highlighted are really going to make it harder for everyone in this state to survive. And I don't overstate that. When we're talking about impacts on people's jobs, on their health care, on education issues, these are things that we need to not simply prosper, but to survive. And there are so many people that when we see cuts at the federal level, when you lose a job and you lose your ability to feed your family, we're talking about life or death issues. And, I struggle in my position as the Attorney General from raising the alarm about this moment that we're in America without being like an alarmist. Because it is easy to open up the news every day or, as I like to do, I wake up and I look at Twitter. I shouldn't do it. But it is easy to get in this habit of concern and alarm. And these are real issues, and they are hitting some of the most vulnerable communities the most acutely. That being said, I think it's an important place for us to start with, not a damn thing has changed about Washington state law. Every executive action that happens, we need to take the changes that we see from an executive order seriously. The impacts of the budget bill that they passed last year is going to be tremendously devastating, I think, to Washingtonians. At the same time, none of that changed any law passed by our legislative leaders in Olympia or the things that are happening here in Pierce County or other places across the state. And so it is good that we need to highlight that we still have some of the best protections possible when it comes to state-based labor laws. Now, ideally, we would work in partnership with the federal administration to advance the cause of labor. And it is so easy for people in my generation, and my kids think I'm really old, but I'm also young enough to remember growing up at a time where the struggle of the labor movement that my grandparents went through, was so prominent in the public discourse. Whereas in my generation, you can sort of forget it or not be as prominent in your mind. But we need to sort of get back into that spirit of lifting up and supporting and advancing all of the work that has happened from the labor movement over the last many decades. And Phil, and so there are sort of two principal, I think, advocacy roles and actions that we can take in the Attorney General's office. One, we obviously litigate things that we think are illegal happening from the federal administration. And for all issues, including the issues impacting working people in this country, my standard is the same no matter what. Is what we're seeing from the president illegal or unconstitutional? Does it harm Washington or Washington organizations? If those things line up, then we ask a third question about whether or not we need to be involved in litigation to protect the interest here at home. And time again, we're seeing things that we believe are illegal, absent congressional approval, in violation of state sovereignty, in violation of some constitutional privilege. I don't take any great pleasure in suing the president. And I know that my critics out there might want to say otherwise. I would rather not have to spend so much time and energy protecting Americans from their president. But I do believe that is the moment that we are in. And so when we see things that are impacting working people specifically, we act. When they were doing illegal firings of federal workers, we joined in litigation to try to prevent that. Not because this was some abstract issue happening in D.C., but because there were federal workers here, including employees at the VA just down the road, who were being laid off. VA workers who provide transition services for people exiting the military, housing, job placement, all those sorts of things that is impacting people. When we see actions that are illegal in any of those contexts, we act. And we also continue to try to find ways to work with our partner client agencies like L&I and other agencies across the state to make sure that we're filling, to the extent that we can, any of those voids elsewhere. And so there's going to be an increased need for our agency employees in the Attorney General's office to bring cases on behalf of workers when we see their rights being violated. When we see discrimination happening for any sort of purpose in your employment, we will act. When we see wage theft cases, we're going to be acting more than we have. So that's an important void for us to fill. And the last thing that I can do is things like we're doing here tonight. And, this is not a cure-all for all the issues that we're facing. But the more time and attention that we can bring to the issue of working people, the better that we can work in collaboration to move forward. And as much as I love and will champion my home state, I think we still have a lot of work to do. And we need to be asking questions more around these issues. How do we champion these issues? How do we bring more time and attention to these issues so the next generation does not forget about the importance of the work that you and your partner organizations are doing across this state?
Thank you. I want to lift up a couple of the things that I heard. One, that the laws in Washington state haven't changed. That is a source of comfort for sure. Two, that you are really focused on, that you don't take satisfaction, that's not the word you used, you don't enjoy pleasure suing the federal government, but you, that you are doing the hard work of protecting Washingtonians from our president in this moment. And then the third thing that I heard you say, and these are my words, not yours, but that you have a lot of ideas on what we can do to protect workers, but it's forums like this where we will crowdsource some of those. So we'll identify those problems and crowdsource some of those solutions. And you want to be in partnership with labor as we figure that out.
Yeah, it is easy for me to see that working people are getting screwed.
Yeah.
I can see that. You guys are living it. You're representing people that are living it. And the more that we can do to elevate those issues, I certainly have ideas. My staff has ideas. But I want our solutions to be grounded by the people it's most impacting. And that is why we have these conversations, and that is why we need to work in partnership.
That's great. Thank you. All right. So I had the first question, but we do have a few other questions, pre-sorted questions for tonight. We're going to go through those, and then we'll open it up for the audience. All right. I'm in my chair hat. I want to say delegate at the mic, but my friend at the mic, please ask your question and introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Sean Briggs. I'm with AFT Local 3913 here at Clover Park Technical College. It's the faculty union. I work with our high school students and trying to prepare them for the workforce and competitive wages in the trades. Our students, our graduates, staff, we're facing increased costs at the grocery store, healthcare, housing, transportation. My wife and I just bought our first house this spring, and in 10 years, the cost has gone up 123% for our one house. Home ownership has become a burden in Tacoma, causing us to delay starting a family and other big life events. It's a broad question, but what can your office do to help average Washingtonians who are facing that how do we make ends meet question in Tacoma, Lakewood, South Sound area?
Yeah. Well, I feel like we could spend all night on this one question. Let me say first and foremost, my father, after he retired from the Army and from the state service, was a career counselor here at Clover Park Technical College. I did not tell them to find someone who does some of that same work to ask one of these questions. But I just want to thank you for your work because I know how important it is to be helping students and graduates find those job opportunities because job opportunities are at a minimum these days. And, I mentioned a little bit, and others did as well in the initial remarks, Washington is such a unique place because we have some of the richest people in America who live 5 miles from where I live. And yet, we see people on the farther end of the spectrum living on the streets, struggling to get by, or living in housing that is temporary at best. And then we have a whole middle class or aspiring middle class of people who are not homeless, who are not living on the street, but are worried about paying their mortgage or worried about paying their rent. As someone who just sold his house and is now a renter for the first time in a while, I can understand, and I hear from so many people, and our office hears from so many people, about just the worry. They have a job, they're getting paid, but worry about making just those basic ends meet. There are, I think, a number of solutions that we need to be addressing. There are things specifically that my office and I work on collaboratively that get to some of these issues, but certainly not all. Let me just highlight a few things. One, we have in the divisions in our office that probably most directly interface with the public are our Consumer Protection Division and our Antitrust Division that are trying to get some of these larger issues that are impacting people. So when companies are defrauding the public, when they advertise something that's false, when they put out a product that is not doing what it's supposed to do, when people are buying into programs that are misleading or misadvertising, we have the authority under Washington state law to litigate. And we have been doing those on an increased basis. And I want to give my predecessor, now Governor Ferguson, a lot of credit for building a nationally leading, robust consumer protection division, because that is the issue where we can try to address some of the issues on affordability. It is the same around the antitrust issues that we have, our antitrust division that we have. We successfully fought against the merger of Kroger and Albertsons this year. That was a long-standing effort that both protected the workers and some of the pricing issues that we were going to see at grocery stores here and many places across the state. So those are big cases that we can do that are going to impact people, even if you don't always see the impacts. But those are really just scratching out the surface. And the one area where I would say that we have done some work as an agency that I hope to do a lot more work is around housing specifically. Because we are in a crisis point now for housing. And by the way, Washington State is going to add about 1 million people in the next 10 years. And so the crisis that we are going to be facing is going to be exponentially harder. And unless we really, really take that issue seriously now, by building more housing, by protecting people who are both home owners and tenants, we are going to fail, and that crisis that we are now experiencing is going to get even more acute and more serious. So around housing specifically, my agency does some work around housing discrimination in our civil rights unit. We do a lot of robust actions there. My hope is to do more. I want to do everything we can to expand the protections under the Landlord-Tenant Act to make sure that we have more tools to enforce that law. And we need to do everything we can to make housing development and building as easy as possible while still protecting some of the very important protections that we have here in Washington State. But that work needs to be happening now, and it needs to be happening in partnership with all of the executive branch agencies and our local partners, because it is going to get a lot worse than it is right now. So there are things that we are doing that I think are going to impact some of those affordability issues. But we also just need to really highlight the dichotomy that we're facing in this state. And Washington, I think, is experiencing that more than most every other state, given the billionaires and millionaires that we have living in some of the priciest neighborhoods in the country, and at the other end, people really struggling to get by. And unless we talk about that, unless we think about issues to address those wage gaps and that wage concentration, the problems are going to get worse.
Thank you. I think it's really important for us to be reminded. Got this one working. I should hold on to one of these just in case. It's really important for us to be reminded that for all that you've been doing since you got elected to protect us from our current president, that there is so much more that you're doing right here in Washington State around consumer protection, and that you're thinking about these affordability issues. So thank you.
Yeah, and this is a larger conversation for us, but the cases in our agency that get the headlines that people ask me the most about that are the federal cases. And I understand that. When you sue the president 37 times, as I have, that generates a lot of attention. But we have, in the AG's office, we have 830 lawyers. It is the second biggest law firm on the West Coast, second only to the California Attorney General's office. Another 900 or so staff that are professional staff, legal assistants, paralegals, and the like. The federal work is a tiny the federal work against the administration is a tiny fraction of what we do. And so we are working on a day-to-day basis, supporting all of our agency clients across all of the state, agents, to improve their services to the public, and doing all these other types of cases that has nothing to do with whoever is in the White House. And so I appreciate you highlighting that, because as much time and attention and energy in the public gets drawn to the crisis that we're seeing from the administration, at any given point, I maybe have 30 lawyers who are touching someone in those cases, which means the other 800 are doing something else. And it's a good issue to frame.
It's nice to know that those other 800 are working for the people in Washington State, too, so thank you.
All right. The people that are involved in suing the administration are also working for Washington State.
Okay, so we have another question at the mic here.
Hi. My name is Mitch Forehand. I am a member of the IUPAT, or the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, DC 5, Local 300 Painters. As you know, or as you mentioned, wage theft is rampant all over the world, but speaking locally, whether it's been my own experience of being paid at a lower wage than I was promised verbally originally, or to some of the more well-known companies that are not following through with paying their fleet drivers new wages that was locally negotiated through a union, bypassing those CBAs, or countless other examples that can be found online, where these families are usually one paycheck away or a couple hours of missed work away from losing their homes or their meals. How can you as the Attorney General and us as individuals help make sure that workers are paid what they're owed, their rights are respected, and easily accessible to be understandable?
No, I appreciate it. I touched on it a little bit in my opening remarks, just about the collective impact from robberies, thefts, burglaries combined is less than wage theft in America. And, it's an interesting statistic for my ears, but I also think that the way we simply think about these issues, we really need to reframe. And, if somebody walks into your Target or Fred Meyer or whatever store you shop at, and they steal something, and people see it, everywhere in that store is going to be like, well, that's a crime. We should hold that person accountable. You might disagree on the accountability, but we all recognize that as a wrong that should be righted in some way. When an employer doesn't pay you what you deserve, what you've been guaranteed, we collectively don't think about it in the same way. And I don't necessarily want to criminalize every sort of thing around wage theft, but we really need to shift the narrative in terms we talk about these issues and we think about these issues. And just in Washington, there are millions of dollars that are being stolen from employees, far more than any theft or retail theft or anything that happens on, at the ground level that we all can see and know is wrong. And we're in this mindset now where employers, we have a really hard time catching them, identifying it, and enforcing it in a way that's meaningful and lasting and impactful, not only for that employer, but for the wider employer community. And so there are things that we do now that I really want to just do more of and find ways to really get to the heart of some of these cases. So we currently now go after wage theft cases. We do that in partnership with our client agency, L&I, or we do that through our civil rights division. And we've been successful in bringing a lot of those cases, but I also know that we're just scratching the surface and that our capacity to address all of those cases is not nearly what it should to be. So my hope is to create a new unit to help supplement and add to that enforcement power. For better or worse, I think people have recognized that our agency has some real enforcement teeth, and we're going to be talking to the legislature in this coming session about ways to give us more impactful resources and authority in that space to make sure that we're holding people accountable. But the other thing that we need to do, and that's part of the reason that my team and I wanted to have this meeting tonight, is that our ability to really get to some of these systemic, impactful issues relies so heavily on our partnership with you all, and to make sure that we are getting to the heart and to the most serious issues that that you all and your comrades are facing. Because, again, a lot of our work is driven by community complaints or referrals filed with L&I, and that's good, powerful work. But if we are not in partnership and communication and community with you all on a really consistent basis, we're not going to be getting to the heart of the issue. So my commitment is to dedicate more of my agency's power and enforcement authority to those issues. And my ask of you and your partners here is to help us really identify those most important cases and to change that narrative. Like in Washington, look, we need employers, right? We have a great state with a lot of good jobs because we have been a welcoming state for the employer community. We need good jobs here and good employers here, but we also need to hold them accountable when they're doing wrong. And so we need to be in dialogue with both labor and the employer community to make sure that they understand that we're going to hold them accountable when they're not protecting workers, and figure out ways that we can make sure that they're doing their jobs and they understand those obligations outside of an enforcement action. Because litigation is an important tool that I have. It's not the only tool that I have. I would much rather resolve problems outside the courtroom if we can. But we need to make sure that they understand there's teeth behind the actions that we're going to take.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It strikes me that it's twofold, right?
We can hear you.
Y'all can hear me in the back?
No.
No,
Give her that.
not again.
Let me give her this one.
On to the next question.
I'm sorry, they're being pesky.
It's probably, maybe I should just hold on to this.
Yeah.
Good evening, Attorney General Brown. My name is Justin Budd, and I go by human, he, him pronouns. I live in Tacoma. I am a member of SEIU 775. I'm a caregiver. I'm a living caregiver, and I've been with them for a little over 6 years, coming up to 6 years with my client, caring for her. As a caregiver, as a home care provider, I'm really concerned with these Medicaid cuts, how it's going to affect myself as a caregiver and my client. Is she going to lose her caregiving, myself, my role and responsibility as a caregiver? Who's going to care for her? Like, who's going to help her in the shower? Who's going to cut her food? Who's going to make her food? Who's going to help her with choosing clothes to wear when the weather changes? All of these concerns are concerning me. And who's going to take her to physical and occupational therapy appointments and leisure activities? Who's going to clean her place? Cuts to Medicaid is a terrible financial hardship for me and other caregivers. I really enjoy my job as a caregiver, but I'm really concerned about my housing as a live-in provider, about having to find a new job, and it could take over a month, and all the unnecessary expenses and late fees I would have if I had to find a new job. and I would not have health care without my job. All of these unnecessary financial hardship I would have if Medicaid is cut. And we need more skilled caregivers and not less. So my question to you tonight is, what necessary actions are you going to take to protect long-term care and health care for clients and caregivers alike?
Thank you. Let me thank you for your work, and you might have heard a whoop. That's from my comms director, who's former SEIU 775 member. Last year I had the opportunity to do a walk-a-day with a caregiver. And for folks who haven't had that experience or don't know the work that goes into being a caregiver, I knew it academically, but to spend some hours with someone who does what sounds like a similar work that you do was really eye-opening to me. And when I said in my opening comments that we're talking about life or death issues, that really gets to the heart of it, because you are talking about employees who are literally helping people survive on a day-to-day basis, preparing their food, taking them to necessary medical appointments. And without the work that you do and your colleagues do, people would really struggle to survive. And that work is necessary because there's not someone else to do that for them. And we as a state need to fill that void. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I appreciate the opportunity to have shadowed some of that work previously. And what you're getting at, I think, is really highlights kind of an obscene action from the administration. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the bill that was passed last year, the big, beautiful bullshit. Sorry. I'm glad my father's not here. He would chastise me for cursing. There were so many things about that bill that are troubling and will be devastating, but some of the cuts that you're talking about specifically are going to lose lives, cause a loss of lives. When you cut funding for some of these vital services that you and others are helping to provide for Washingtonians, it's going to lead to the loss of lives. And I don't want to sugarcoat that. And I think when they try to convince you otherwise, and when the people who supported that bill, including two of our own congressmen, I just think they're being dishonest. And also, the impacts of that bill, in particular those cuts, are not slated to hit immediately. They're slated to hit after the midterms. Yeah. And we all know why. I don't think Washington State by itself can fill that void. If there was a silver bullet to do that, we absolutely would do it. And I think there are things that we can do to mitigate that harm. I think we need to be looking as much as we can to support progressive revenue in this state. I do not want to balance. I don't think we should ever try to balance our budgetary needs on behalf of state workers. I think that's the wrong way to approach these solutions or these challenges that we have. But there is no single one thing that we can do. And we need to be thinking about all the ways that we can protect people's health care benefits. And there are certainly things that we do both against the administration and in here, supporting our client agencies here and working with the legislature to protect health care protections and health care rights that will help provide some mitigation of those harms that you're talking about. But again, I think that's only scratching the surface. It's going to be all of these things together, new progressive revenue to fill some of these holes, aggressive actions to make sure that we're protecting health care benefits. When we see healthcare misconduct in the healthcare industry or in the healthcare insurance industry, using our tools to go after them to make sure people's rights and healthcare benefits aren't being taken away. But I also recognize we're going to play a relatively small role in that overall fight. But it's going to take all of that and more to really get to the heart of it, I think.
I heard, you guys can give it up for that. I heard a lot of energy around the big, beautiful bullshit bill. I also heard a lot of energy around that it's going to take some progressive revenue, that we're not, as a state, going to be able to solve these problems. And I just want to offer that there's clearly a room full of leaders and activists who are willing and ready to engage in that conversation more. So thank you for lifting that. And now you have the next question, my dear.
Thank you. Welcome, Attorney General Brown. My name is Janie White. I am the Washington Education Association Vice President. My pronouns, thank you. My pronouns are she, her. As we all know, across the country, we're facing increasing challenges, including impacts from the Department of Education cuts. This is really tough for us, for our students' needs, especially with our special ed funding, with substitute shortages, free and reduced lunch for our students. We talked about Medicaid, but we forget that students need Medicaid for their glasses, for their medication, for their insulin, and so much more. You mentioned the progressive revenue taxes, which will help our education support professionals with funding, and also our special ed. So I appreciate that, but my main question is, with all that we are talking about, what could be happening for education, what steps can we all take together to protect and ensure funding and resources in schools for our students and our educators?
Well, I'm not sure actually what it is here in Pierce County or Tacoma, but tomorrow in the Seattle School District is back to school. So both of my kids are going back to school tomorrow. My daughter was really upset because she ripped her first day of school jeans yesterday, but that's a whole other story. She just turned 13 this weekend. Let me, first and foremost, it is the state's paramount duty to educate our children. We went through, as a state, with our legislature and the governor's office, and you all, really important litigation around that. We need to make sure that we don't forget that educating our children remains our paramount duty, and that is all of our children. And so there is some advocacy work that I need to do, that my agency needs to do, to make sure that we continue to elevate that as our paramount duty. And that is our constitutionally mandated paramount duty. It's not just some priority idea for me or from anybody else. It is what our Constitution requires of us. And it is first and foremost my job to enforce the Washington State Constitution. Number two for me is to make sure that we litigate, if necessary, against cuts to that are coming from the Federal Department of Education. And we did that successfully this year. And, there were nationally, it was about $184 million of cuts from the federal administration, including about 30 from different buckets, $30 million to Washington State. And what this was is the federal administration, again, not acting through Congress, not working to build coalitions and pass a bill to authorize these cuts, not working with the impacted states, but the federal government simply stopped providing money that they had promised to Washington State. And every time I bring a case, I recognize that 40-something% of the population didn't vote for me. So there, we bring a case against the administration, there's always people who complain about it. It still surprises me, frankly, when people complain about our efforts to enforce the law and to protect our children. And in that case against the cuts to the Department of Education, we were doing both of those things. Whether you think it was a good idea or not, Donald Trump and his team broke the law by not giving us money that they had promised to give us. And, all of us here have entered into some sort of contract with somebody. A lease, a car contract, an employment contract, something. A contract requires both parties to do something. Either you give money for services or there's the promise is a guarantee. And that's essentially what education funding was. It was a promise from the administration that you were going to receive a certain amount of money and a breach of that contract by the Trump administration. And that is why we sued. And we sued and we won because the administration changed course. it was interesting to me in that case because, not surprisingly, there's not been a single Republican AG has joined any of our cases against the Trump administration. And I understand the dynamics there, why it would be hard for them politically to do that. But the cuts that we were facing, it wasn't a red state or a blue state issue. Every state and every school district in America was going to be impacted in some ways. And so while we litigated, a number of states through their governors or their AGs sort of quietly and some publicly said, please don't do that. And it was the combination of our litigation and a recognition from everybody in the country that these were going to hurt children. And it was going to hurt some of our most vulnerable children that require additional funding just to eat and be healthy and focused in school. It was going to cut after-school services for kids. It was going to cut translation services for kids. And you are guaranteed a right to education whether or not you are a citizen or you're undocumented. And that is simply what the law requires. And it is my job to enforce those laws. And that is why we have been involved in those cases. So we will continue to litigate and fight these issues. We will continue to work with our legislative partners to make sure they don't lose track of the paramount duty. But we need to make sure that our kids are prospering. My daughter doesn't want to start 7th grade tomorrow, but look, she needs to. And it's not just for her benefit, right? It's for our benefit. This is the next generation of our workforce, of our leaders. And if we're cutting money, the idea that you can simply doge the Department of Education and there's not going to be an impact, it's just bullshit. Sorry, again, Mom. It's just going to have an impact. And again, they're violating the law in doing that, and that is why we continue to act.
Well, thank you for your work. Continue to sue, because we'll continue to boo.
So I know we've got other folks that have questions, but you, in mentioning this lawsuit and how you were able to successfully free up those dollars, I'm reminded that there were a few other lawsuits that also involved freeing up federal dollars for Washington State. And I don't know if you want to talk about those at all.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I've been Attorney General for just under 8 months. As I mentioned, we've sued the administration 37 times. For a little bit of context, nationally there are over 40 cases that one of my Democratic colleagues have brought. So I have not joined every single case. Every case, every AG and their teams analyze it a little differently. Every state is impacted a little differently. And there have been some cases that my colleagues have joined where I've decided not to join because I just didn't think it was right for Washington State. So we haven't joined every case. On the other end of the spectrum, at this point in 2017, I think we had about a half a dozen cases. So the fact that we're now at 37 shows both how prepared we are for this moment and also the wide scope of actions. And the vast majority of our cases, in one way or the other, are impacting dollars that, again, were guaranteed to Washington State. And in our 7 months, we have successfully protected about $14 billion of cuts to Washington. Now, and that's billion with a B. That was money that was promised through congressional action or some grant authorization to Washington State that our litigation, often with other states, has protected here in Washington. And I highlight not to cheerlead for our own agency, but just to highlight what would happen had we not acted and the impacts that would have happened to Washington now and moving forward. And also, again, so many people, they say, well, why aren't you focused on Washington issues and like what's happening in D.C. doesn't impact us. And I can also assure you that the budget of my agency is not $14 billion. So we are spending a lot less on our litigation than we have recovered or protected for Washington State. And that's really important because those fights are going to continue. We're going to have more challenges and more illegal cuts, and we need to be in a position to act aggressively on behalf of the people that we protect here in Washington.
That's amazing. 14 billion with a B. Thank you for that work. You have a question for our AG?
Hello, my name is Natalie Wellen. I am president of UAW 4121, which represents 9,000 academic and research workers at University of Washington. This year, Washington has received $600 million less in federal research funding compared to last year at this point in time, as the Trump administration continues to escalate attacks on research, healthcare, and higher education. This is money that Congress has appropriated, but the federal government is not distributing, which will exacerbate the impacts of the big, beautiful bullshit. Unionized researchers across the state are speaking out about the consequences of these cuts to our communities. My friend Lucas was furloughed and prevented from working on suicide prevention for teens. My member Angela's research doing clinical trials has faced pauses, which cuts life-saving treatments to patients in Washington. And Aaron at Washington State University doesn't have the funding to continue to restore habitats and improve conditions for salmon in the Yakima River. And this is to name just a few. We appreciate your office's work to mitigate these cuts through litigation. So my question is, how can you talk about how workers can partner with you in your fight for research funding?
Is it okay to say "Go Dogs" in this moment? No? Sorry. I represent the entire state. Go Cougars, too. Well, first of all, thank you for your work. I think it is great that we have so many of our academic institutions that have unionized workforces across the spectrum of different jobs at universities. So thank you for your leadership with your union. I want to highlight in particular how vital it has been for us as an agency to be in partnership with our universities, because so many of the cuts that have happened in the last 8 months have been targeted at universities. And we have had some wins and some losses. And look, my job is not to just sell you all the great things that are happening, but to be transparent about some of the challenges. And we, I think, had an early victory around protecting cuts to the universities. The National Institute of Health funding that was threatened and cut that we successfully, in the beginning, were able to stop. I chose to join that case not because we simply wanted to sue the president, but because of what you're talking about. Because it was hundreds of millions of dollars to the University of Washington and Washington State University and other partners. And that was money not only for the universities, but it was money that was going to healthcare research. And it was money that was necessary to fund people's jobs and employment. And so when you cut jobs, or when you cut funding to the universities here and across the country, you are impacting not only their jobs, but you're also impacting life-saving healthcare research. And the idea that we would simply do that and think it's a good idea is still baffling to me. But to get to the heart of your story or your question, I think what is most vital for us as an agency is to be able to tell the stories of the people that are harmed or impacted negatively by some of these cuts. And that is why it is important for us to be out in public and engage with the community, because the vast majority of our cases that we've been able to bring in the last 8 months and that we have done historically as an agency are all based on people's stories. And so our partnership with the University of Washington, with the impacted workforce, has only been as strong as our ability to be able to get directly to the people most impacted. When we bring a civil rights case, it is because we are telling the stories of people whose lives are impacted. When we bring a case of wage theft, it is because we are bringing a case talking about the impact of that workforce. And so what I would hope that we can continue to do and find ways to do better moving forward is to be in partnership with you, both on the reactive side, so when we see a cut, we can be quick in court. And look, my team is good because of the work that's happened over the last 8 months, but also good for all the work that's been happening over the preceding years. And there's been a lot of prep in getting ready for this moment, and a ton of work by the lawyers and professional staff and investigators in my agency. So we need to be in partnership when something bad happens so we can react to it. But I think better for us moving forward is to find ways that we can be in partnership before those negative impacts can happen. And so we need to be thinking about, all the ways that your lives and your jobs can be improved when we're not responding to some crisis that puts your job at liberty. And that is, I hope the relationship that we can have going forward. So I would simply encourage you and the rest of our friends and colleagues here to be as engaged as possible with our agency, and we're going to try to do more to be more engaged with you as well.
Sí, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es José Ramírez y soy presidente de Familia Unida por las Justicias y soy un trabajador del campo. Ay, discúlpame que no hablo inglés, pero aquí tengo mi traductor.
So, José Ramírez, president of Familias Unidas por la Justicia and also a farm worker. And I'm just his translator. So local and professional farm workers are finding it harder and harder to support their families. Not only because of ICE and Border Patrol, they're also seeing themselves pushed out of jobs by growers bringing in H-2A workers. This happens in different ways. Growers often do their best not to really advertise local jobs. They sometimes tell local workers there aren't jobs available because H-2A workers are coming. The other thing is that growers advertise job terms that aren't acceptable to real workers in the local job market. For example, they're saying only going after flat hourly wages for fruit harvest, and that's where skilled farm workers have always been able to pick by the pound or by the bin and save money to get their families through the winter. If we don't do something, the entire farm workforce will be vulnerable. H-2A workers who are disconnected from our communities can't speak up when conditions are horrible. What is the Attorney General's office doing, or what can it do to help farm workers locally?
Yeah. Well, thank you for your work, and thank you for being here with him in partnership. I'll talk about farm workers specifically, but let me just first acknowledge the moment that we're in when so many people are fearful for their safety on a day-to-day basis. They're fearful that when they go to work, whether that's at a farm or elsewhere, that they're going to be able to come home to their families at night. And we have, from my perspective, a real draconian approach to immigration enforcement happening right now in our country, where we are seeing tactics that are being used around immigration enforcement that we've never seen before as a country. That is not only, I think, harmful to our overall economy and individuals, but is creating a tinderbox of fear from so many people. And that is a crisis state that we don't have to live in, but we've chosen to elect someone who does not want to bring people together, but wants to instill this fear in our country. And we, as a state, as a community, need to do everything that we can to be protecting people who are trying to go to work and work on behalf of their family. Because there was this narrative during the election last year that the administration was only going to be focused on the criminals. And that's just a lie. That's not what we're seeing. And that was highlighted probably most directly in the last week when they are arresting people fighting the largest wildfire in Washington state. And that is not an acceptable place for us to be in as a state or as a country. There are things specifically that farm workers in Washington are facing that other workforces don't have to deal with in the same percentage of their workforce, where people that are working as farm workers are having their identity and their status be a target for adverse, illegal actions by their employers, who are threatening harmful deportations or threatening other adverse actions against their workforce and stealing their wages and denying them benefits that are, again, protected under Washington state law. As an agency, we have enforcement authority in that specific area, and our agency's Civil Rights Division has been doing a lot of tremendous work on behalf of farm workers in this state by going after employers who are violating Washington state law. And I think we have 2 active cases right now, specifically trying to protect farm workers who are being targeted illegally by their employers. And I'll let those cases speak for themselves as they move forward. But it is really important that we've been able to bring those cases in large part because of farm worker unions and farm workers telling their stories to us. And so I just want to thank you, because I know your union in particular has been really willing to stand up and to have their voices heard, despite some of the negative consequences and attention that may come for you and your members. But I'm really thankful that the AG's office here in Washington is not simply standing up and taking the easy cases, but taking on the hard cases. And we will need to continue to litigate those aggressively moving forward.
So I'm going to do a quick time check. We've got about 17 minutes. I promised y'all we'd be out of here right at 8:30 sharp, and it is 8:13. We are going to open this up to questions, but I'm going to ask you all to please keep your questions concise so that we can get to as many folks as possible. And I also want to thank you for just acknowledging the particular challenge and complexity in supporting our agricultural workers, and particularly our undocumented and immigrant workers in this moment. So thank you. My friend at the mic, you have a question.
Can anyone hear me? Okay. Greetings, everyone. Greetings, Attorney General Nick Brown. Greetings, Miss President, Miss April Smith. My name is Garfield. I'm with Drivers Union. We advocate for TNC drivers in the state of Washington, about over 30,000, and then there's the taxi drivers not even included. My question is relating to not just rent control, but a little bit more important, monopolies. If you look at the owners of the property and real estate all across America nationally, you look at BlackRock, you look at Vanguard, and you look at Blackstone. Does the Attorney General's office plan to bring any suit against these organizations, these companies, these landlords regarding monopolies? And if so, do you have it in the making, planning, or do you see it as feasible to, because it affects everyone, farmers, everyone needs a place to live. So I'm asking you, do you plan to bring any lawsuit against the monopoly structure that keeps the rent too damn high?
So if I can bring a case against an illegal housing monopoly in Washington state, I would love to do it. Because I think that there are so many things that are contributing to the housing affordability crisis that we are in now. One is our lack of development, our NIMBYism, that people don't want to see multifamily housing in their communities. There are a lot of things about our overall state structure that I think have contributed to that. But the aggregation of housing companies and housing monopolies is increasing our prices across the state and across the country. Whether or not all of those constitute an illegal monopoly is a different question. I have no question that some of them do. And if they manifest here in Washington, I would absolutely love to bring a case. We brought a case earlier this year against RealPage, which has been using, from our perspective, an illegal price-fixing algorithm to drive up rental prices here in Washington state. So we brought our own independent case against RealPage because of the things that they were doing that were harming Washingtonians. It was different. I think it was about 10 different property companies in Washington state that were driving up illegally prices for people. And so if there are opportunities for us to do that against national monopolies, we will absolutely do that. We brought another case against housing developers. They were providing low-income, fixed-income housing for seniors and lying about the types of services and the types of rent increases that would be attributed to those properties here in Washington state. So I think we've been pretty aggressive in bringing some of those cases, but if there are some of these national monopolies that are also contributing to that, absolutely, we'll bring those cases.
You have a department, like you said, you have a unit investigating things of that. Is that on the agenda regarding the monopolies that are increasing rent here in Washington, not just nationally?
We're not going to create a new division to do that, but both in our antitrust division, in our civil rights division, and our complex case division, we bring those types of cases.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Hello, I'm Renee Hernandez Greenfield. I'm a member of AFT Washington Tacoma Community College, FT 2196. Hello. Thanks. Early childhood educator of 19 years, a portion of that time as the director of Campus Children's Center there on Tacoma Community College's campus, 8 years as faculty. Early childhood educators are the backbone of our workforce. Without affordable care, parents, they can't work. Yet these educators are some of the lowest paid in Washington. Now with the C-Campus Child Care Grant, so C-Campus, child care access means parents and schools, that grant is now in jeopardy. Both families and educators are at risk of losing critical support for them to stay in the workforce and to go to college. So Attorney General, how can your office help protect student parents and help educators who make our workforce possible?
My mother's sitting here in the middle, kind of a few rows back, and I try to avoid her because it makes me nervous. But I just want to highlight that she was an employee and a dean at TCC for many, many years. So, Mom, thank you for your service. So there are things that we can do to protect some of the grant cuts that have happened and some things that we simply can't do. We don't represent individual organizations outside of state government or the people as a whole, so we can't represent advocacy groups or nonprofits or standalone workforces like that, but we can try to advocate on your behalf. We do that a lot through amicus briefs in support of some of the litigation that's happened. We also do that a lot through our advocacy outside of the courts. And so we advocate through letters to Congress and in relationships with Congress and some of those cuts. Some of that helps. Some of that, I don't have any naive belief that it's going to make a difference. But it's still important to take a stand on some of these issues. But here in Washington, as I sort of addressed a little bit earlier, we need to do everything we can, not only to protect the education funding that you're relying on, but to make sure we're supporting all these other social safety nets that people rely on. Because these don't happen in a vacuum. When you cut an education program and you cut these other programs, they're all going to have a collective impact on people. And there are ways that we can advocate for some of those social services and that safety net to protect people and try to lift up some of the impacts that you all are facing. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Rick Mann, Carpenters Local 360, 20-year member. I have a question about the workman's comp system. I'm currently navigating it. I was injured on a job. I broke my hip, delaminated a disc, and herniated a disc. And the employer is privately insured through Sedgwick. They're out of Lexington, Kentucky. And it took me 16 months and a 3-hour police interview just to get medical attention. And then it took another 6 months to actually see a doctor after they double-checked everything to make sure it was what they wanted. And since I've been going through this, it's every few months when the current prescribed care ends, you have to go back for a follow-up visit with the doctor, and the opposing counsel, I guess, has an option where they have to approve what the doctor says, and they're allowed 90 days by the state and these guys take the full 90 days, and sometimes they don't even respond. And then Ella and I had to get involved at the beginning of this because they were just giving me the runaround. But then Labor and Industries gets involved, and they have, I think it's 30 days to respond. So I end up waiting 120 days in between visits to continue my medical care. And my understanding is that these insurance companies are like given a quiver full of these flags that they can throw. And Sedgwick exhausted all those flags with me, and I still was found in my favor. And in March of this year, they sold or transferred their claim to Broadspire, which is another insurance company that is out of Lexington, Kentucky. And some of the members that were on my previous case through Sedgwick are on my current case now through Broadspire. And they basically, once they transferred it to this other insurance company, they have a whole new quiver, just like Sedgwick had, and now they're just throwing flags out. And last month, they called and just said, we're not paying for his medical care anymore. And I'm in the appeals process right now.
I'm going to ask you to pause for just a moment and see if the AG has a response to this. And if not, then perhaps we could take this offline. And there might be some additional resources that the staff can provide you for a more in-depth conversation. But I don't know if you have an initial reaction to this.
Well, when I talked about workers getting screwed, right, this is the type of roadblocks that so many people are facing. Obviously, every case is, fact dependent, but the insurance companies, they don't want to pay, right? And they're throwing up those roadblocks using the quivers that they have to make that as difficult as possible. So let's make sure we connect with our team, and if there's more about your specific case that we can help with, we're happy to help. But there's a larger systemic issue that I think the state needs to try to address for sure.
My question on it would be, is there anything that our state can do through legislation to make a penalty system for when these the insurance companies do stuff like this that it's not warranted? Like, hey guys, it's a privilege to work in our state, and if you're going to abuse our workers, you're not welcome here.
There certainly might be. I don't want to pretend to know exactly what that solution will be, but I think we need to be thinking about those solutions and be acting on them. Yeah, thank you.
It looks like the team is ready to grab your contact information too. So I want to do a quick time check. We have 5 minutes, and I know that there are 3 of you in line. So if we are not able to get through all of the questions, then I have a website where you can fill out a form, ask your question, and someone from the team will follow up with you. So we're going to take your question. If you can answer it, if you can ask it quickly and you can answer it quickly, we might be able to get to another question.
Good evening. Owen Lawson. I am a constituent, zip code 98466. And I lead with my zip code because, A.G. Brown, when I saw you a little less than 12 months ago, you were at my place of worship, New Beginnings Christian Fellowship. 12 years ago, we started the Red Tail Hawks Flying Club, which is a flying club which is purposed on exposing underrepresented communities to opportunities in aerospace and aviation. The challenge that we face this year is that we have lost over $150,000 of funding from corporate partners. We never built it to be dependent upon corporate partners. When we look at the education outcomes in the zip code around the church, our students are underperforming. And when we think about the equitable return on our tax contribution to the state budgets, we are underallocated. I was impressed with the debate that took place at New Beginnings. I'm looking to leave this evening with 3 cases that I need to have my eyes trained on to be a more engaged citizen that will help me to stay attuned to the healthcare disparities that are increasing against folks in my community. So what are the cases, since I'm not a lawyer, but as a citizen, I have a responsibility to follow these things closer. So I'd like to know that from a healthcare perspective, because I spent 30 years in the healthcare space. I only want 1 case. If you could leave me with that or have someone in your staff get back, great. The second question would be around education, and the last one.
Owen, we could talk offline.
Yeah.
I know that you have more questions.
That was it. I just want to make sure he got the gist of my questions.
Yeah.
We'll give you an opportunity. It must be I don't know, the light keeps
It's
going
you.
on.
You're
I'll give you an
magnetic.
opportunity to answer the question, and then we're going to bring the evening to a close.
Yeah, let's make sure. I mean, I don't have a specific healthcare case just to cite to you. We do.
Education. Is there anything
Oh,
from
yeah,
an education perspective?
I talked about the education case that we're involved in just recently against the Department of Education. We have a lot of cases that we're doing on behalf of our agency client, OSPI, and others to make sure that we're holding districts accountable to some of those goals. And also, we're seeing so much retreat from this area because of the attacks from the federal administration on things like DEI, and it's making corporate partners reluctant to engage in some of the programs that you've been supporting. But let's make sure we talk after all. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So it is 8:28. We have 2 minutes. I am going to offer you all, if you still have questions, you can go to atg.wa.gov. That's atg.wa.gov. And I am going to see if our Attorney General would like to close us out with some remarks.
Well, I'll just say for the folks waiting, I'll hang out afterwards too, so we can talk a little bit. So.
Oh, look at that.
About,
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. But for everyone, I'll stand. Let me just thank again April and Nath and all of the folks that advocated for people to come tonight, and thank you to our partners at TBW for bringing people together. Thank you, Executive Mello, for always standing in partnership with us and our union partners here. As I said in the beginning, I hope that this is an ongoing dialogue that we're having across the spectrum, because we need to be really engaged in these issues because of the urgency of the moment that we're facing. But I really appreciate the willingness of people to spend their day and evening hearing from me and from April and coming to share your stories. And I'm committed to doing the best possible job that I can as your Attorney General to make sure we continue to advocate and litigate and fight for working people in this state. So thank you again this evening, and I appreciate everyone for coming.
Yeah, on your feet, one more time for Attorney General Nick Brown.
Thank you.
you.